Card King, here I come. Hello, music fans, music collectors, and all hobbyists. Welcome to the Card King Sports and Variety Show. I'm your host, the Catman, Brian Cataquet, a.k.a. the Card King. We are live on ABC's KMET 1490am.com, your number one spot right here for news and talk on the West Coast. I thank everyone for tuning in this morning. On the telephone line, I welcome to the program a legendary guitarist, Grammy Award-winning artist of the Kentucky Headhunters. We welcome in the great Greg Martin. Greg, Brian C., honor to have you.
Hello, sir. How are you?
How are you? How are you? Thanks so much for your time this morning.
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm drinking coffee and I'm drinking ice. You know, I'm just trying to hydrate. you know, I'm sitting here in my little studio called Electric Lazyland, and of course I heard you guys playing Ram Jam as your music just now a while ago. I believe I heard that. Maybe?
Yes. That's my intro.
I love it. Love that. Yeah, Ram Jam out of Ohio.
Well, that's like my gasoline to get the show going, Greg. So I want to, you're 50 plus years in music. It's earned you a Grammy acclaimed status as a master guitarist. And if we trace back to your early music heroes, Greg, Elysian Fields with Frank Bugby, we have to go back there as part of your influence, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Music was always in the house. You know, my dad played acoustic. I had an uncle, Wade, my dad's brother, that played honky-tonk music around the bars in Louisville and some around Kentucky. He actually traveled. And he wrote High Steppin' Daddy that we recorded on the first Headhunter album, Pickin' on Nashville. And, of course, when the Beatles sprang on the scene in '64, that was a big gunshot around the world, as you know. And, you know, that, and I saw the Lovin' Spoonful in 1966, but the really big defining moment was seeing Frank Bugby with Elysian Field in 1968, October 1968, and changed my life, really. Absolutely. He doesn't get the acclaim he deserves. He was a regional hero. And he was originally in a group called Soul Incorporated, who had a regional hit called I Belong to Nobody, and it ended up on Laurie Records. Him and Marvin and Jim Settle left the band to start a power trio called Elysian Field. And, of course, Frank did that for about a year. Then Frank went off to California to do studio work and to hang out with Jimmy Webb's family and try to get some writing experience. But he's a big hero. He's a big hero, Brian, extremely.
Yeah, and I caught some of his work on YouTube. I mean, the early work of the band, I mean, that's some really heavy stuff, heavy material.
Yeah. Well, you know, the sad thing is they're 45s. They were signed to Imperial Records. They had a song called Kind of a Man, which Greg Allman did with the Hourglass later. I don't know how that happened, but Kind of a Man was really a good song. And the flip side, Alone on Your Doorstep. The funny thing is their 45s for Imperial Records really didn't represent what the band sounded like live, because they were a heavy, you know, they had some heavy blues rock stuff going on. And then, the stuff that has sprang out on YouTube was more demos, actually, the heavier stuff. And they were a great band. They really were. Absolutely. I don't know, Frank, we talk once or twice a week. We still talk. And I don't know really what he got out of the music business. Sometime in the 70s, he just shucked it aside, and that was it. You know, he's back playing again, but there for a while he had enough of it for some reason.
Yeah, that's amazing. So this is around the mid '60s, and then by 1970, as you know, we saw a boom in Southern rock. So now, what were you doing in the early '70s? Were you performing gigs around your area?
Well, I started playing with Richard and Fred Young, the guys in the Headhunters. We started playing together in 1968, and it all sprang out of a 4-H talent show in Edmonton, Kentucky. You know, it was just Richard and me and some schoolmates, and after that was over, Richard said, I've got a band with my brother and my cousin. You want to come over and jam? And I said, yeah, because I'd been bitten by the music bug after seeing Frank in Elysian Field. And it's just the way fate worked. And so I went over to Richard's house. I don't know, it was around November of 68. And they had this family sound already. Their cousin Anthony was on bass. Fred was on drums, Richard on rhythm, and they just had a groove, a natural groove. They always had that, and I just jumped right in with them, you know, and that's what we did all through school. In 1972, I graduated. I'm showing my age here, but I initially was going to stay here in South Central Kentucky in Edmonton, but I got a little scared because my parents wanted to move back to Louisville, and I relented. I went back to Louisville, and unfortunately, I took a job for a little bit and just played music on the side. But the music we were into, Brian, oh gosh, from 68 to 72, we started writing a little later on, but you know, we were always going for the heavier stuff. You know, we were really infatuated with Cream, Jimi Hendrix, a group called NRBQ, which a couple of members are out of Louisville as well. And, oh, man, when we heard 10 Years After on Woodstock, we were really smitten with that. And, of course, we liked Alice Cooper, you know, the early Alice Cooper band, and so much of that. Of course, all along, we were looking on album covers and looking at the credits. In other words, if we were playing Crossroads by Cream, we wanted to know who Robert Johnson was. So we backed up and went, oh, Robert Johnson, great blues artist. And we heard Sitting on Top of the World by Cream. We looked on there and it said, oh, Chester Burnett. So we found out that was Howlin' Wolf. We were listening to the Allman Brothers. Trouble No More. It listed McKinley Morganfield. We found out that was Muddy Waters. So we started studying the blues early on, and we were very lucky and very blessed that we had a station not that far away in Nashville, WLAC, which was an R&B station at night. John R. was the DJ, and if you look up John R., man, he was always breaking, you know, he was playing B.B. King, Freddie King, Albert King, Jimmy Reed, James Brown, Wilson Pickett. And so we were getting our dose of R&B and blues from Nashville, from that station right there. You know, of course, country music was around us too. You know what happens when you mix country, rock, blues, and gospel? You get Southern rock. And that's kind of what happens, you know.
Yeah, I mean, your story is very fascinating. 74 to 77, I believe, you're working, you're managing an electronics store in Louisville. And then 77, you get a call from Richard to join the group. Is that what happened?
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. You know, I worked at a printing. As soon as I got out of high school, moved back to Louisville, I followed my dad's footstep into a printing company, Fawcett Printing Company, and it was okay. You know, made enough money to buy albums and strings and stuff, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And then I took a job at an electronics store, P.I. Burke's, which was a really, really, it was a great job, to be honest with you, because I sold stereos, records, and when the CB boom hit, sold CB radios, and, you know, tubes. And so by 1977, early 77, P.I. Burke's was going to move back down they were going to close the satellite store out in Iroquois Manor where I worked, and they moved me downtown, which I just absolutely hated it down there. The people were great, but I just didn't like it. And so it was just some events that made all this happen with Richard when he called. First off, I was playing with a little group out of Louisville called Rain Tree, which was more of a top 40 band. We had a chance to go to Florida and play spring break. So I just up and quit T.I. Burks and said, throw caution to the wind, let's go. And then about a month or so later, I saw me and Richard hooked up and we went to see Led Zeppelin at Freedom Hall. And that was pretty much it, Brian. After I saw Led Zeppelin, I said, well, that's it. This is what we got to do. And then Richard, Fred, Anthony, and their friend Tim Speck, in the meantime, they had a production deal offered to them. They moved to Atlanta, and they worked with a fellow by the name of Tom Long. And that was under the Itchy Brother name. And sometime around October, I get a call from Richard, and Tim had left the band. They had come home on a break, and somehow Tim didn't want to go back to Atlanta. He had enough of the music. And Richard said, if you come back and play guitar, Anthony will go back and play bass. And we did that, and the magic was still there. The magic was still there. And it just happened. I just had quit P.I. Burks, and it was the perfect time for me to accept Richard's offer, which I'm grateful I did now, for sure.
Yeah, so my audience listening may not know the story. Then in 78, I believe, your bandmate Richard reaches out to Zeppelin's record label, Swan Song, and then what happens?
Oh, yeah. You're right on it, man. I can't remember. Yeah, it was 70s. It was early 78. We were all trapped. Me, listen, thank God. Richard's parents pretty much adopted me. I moved from Louisville, and I stayed with them for about a year. And they picked me a place to stay, and we practiced. And I'll give that, Richard and Fred and their parents were wonderful. And so, we had no practice house that we would practice at, but we got trapped in a snowstorm, like early January of 78. And so me and Richard and Fred and Anthony Kenny, we were in we were in the bedroom one day. We were looking at albums. We had albums scattered everywhere. So we look on the floor is a Led Zeppelin album. I think it was the live album. Song Remains the Same. And Richard said, let's call Swan Song. Because we were writing some pretty good songs by then. And so Richard, here we are trapped on the farm. And we call. Richard calls, and he gets the number for Swan Song. And normally the secretary would answer. But it was after hours. And just so happened that our future manager, Mitchell Fox, was walking out the door to the elevator. He heard the phone ring. He picks the phone up, and he hears this voice from Kentucky, and he was just intrigued with the story that Richard told him. And we started staying in touch with Mitchell, and lo and behold, by Derby time, Mitchell flew down to Soundstage. Things finally thawed out in Kentucky enough where we could go play a gig in Louisville at Soundstage, which was one of our favorite places to play. Mitchell flew down, and he was just smitten by the band, and thus the relationship started with Mitchell Fox as our manager, and he started pitching us to Swan Song, and that was going pretty well until John Bonham passed away. And Swan Song was kind of put on they went on hiatus kind of as Zeppelin was mourning the loss of John. So that disco kind of put the nails in the coffin for our rock and roll career at that point,
It's amazing. Now, there was a story which you told in the past. I believe you were playing in New York City, and Steve Tyler is in the audience, and he mentioned something that you guys should hire me to sing. Can you tell us what happened there?
Yeah, sure. That's just crazy. This would have been, I'm pretty sure this would have been summer of 81. Because there was a brief period where Itchy Brother, we didn't split up. We just went on hiatus. We went on sabbatical. I had ended up taking a gig. Since I'd gotten married, I took a gig playing with a kind of a funk horn band. But then in 80, around 79, 80, we put our band back together. You know, and Mitchell was pitching. You know, initially we were pitching to labels, you know, like all over, you know, and so we decided to go to New York. We did a little showcase in Nashville, but we ended up going to New York and playing the Lone Star, the old Lone Star, and we played out at the Mad Hatter out on the island, and we also played at an establishment called Tracks. And so that night we do our showcase. I remember Gene Cornish from the Rascals being there. Eddie Kramer, the great producer, was there because he'd been doing a little mixing for us. And out in the crowd was Steve Tyler. And this was when Steve wasn't doing real well, you know. Steve was in really good shape. And he watched us play, evidently, and he's yelling, "You need me to sing in your band." And our manager, Mitchell, this is crazy. He says, "Steven, you're all washed up."
Really? Is that right?
You know, of course, poor Steven at that time, he just, like I say, he was just having a rough time, you know. And we were like just amazed. You'll hear a bunch of bumpkins from Metcalfe County, and we're up there in New York, you know, our eyes are wide open, you know, because we've always wanted to go to New York. To us, it was like going to the moon, you know. And
yeah, because I believe Zeppelin's label was in New York City, right? Wasn't it in Rockefeller Center?
Exactly. We actually visited there. Yeah, sure did. And Mitchell was still working there. And after Mitchell said that to Steven, he just kind of disappeared in the crowd. You know, and of course we never got our deal, so we kind of disappeared too for a little bit. But yeah, man, that was our first trip to New York. And it was eye-opening. It was a great experience. I can't tell you, man, going to Manny's for the first time and just seeing the city. It was beautiful, man. So much great energy up there.
So then the Kentucky Headhunters, they formed in 1986, right? And then by 89, you had your number one hit, Pickin' on Nashville. What can you tell us about, what did the band members think when they first heard Pickin' on Nashville?
Well, there was a period after 81, it became apparent that our Itchy Brother project was just going to have to be put on the shelf, and that, you know, with disco and the Swan Song Records deal not working out like it was hopefully going to work out. You know, at that time, you know, I had recently married, and Richard got married, and we decided it was just time to, you know, take a little break. And I took a job with an artist out of Nashville by the name of Ronnie McDowell. Fred took a job with Sylvia, who had some big country hits, as Ronnie did. Richard went to work writing for Acuff Rose Publishing. And Anthony Kenny, I think he was playing some music, but he kind of got out of it at that point, you know. And so in 86, I thought, you know, I loved, Ronnie was a great boss. Sylvia was great to work for. We just started missing each other, and we were starting to really discover the blues and rockabilly music. You know, really, we still loved our hard rock and our southern rock, but we were really becoming students of music, and we started discovering a lot of obscure music like Don and Dewey. And we really started going back and listening to people like Otis Rush, Sonny Boy Williamson, and stuff like that. And we decided to put a band together. And initially it was going to be Itchy Brother, putting Itchy Brother back together. But when Anthony Kenny decided he didn't want to do it, that he had taken a job, and I think he'd had enough of chasing a record deal. And initially, that wasn't our plan to do a record deal. It was just like, hey, let's get together. We're family. Let's play some music. And when Anthony didn't want to do it, I had suggested the bass player in Ronnie McDowell's band, Doug Phelps, who we had started the very same day back in '81. And we got together initially in my basement in Glasgow, Kentucky, and we jammed. And I think the guys had also come to a couple of gigs and check Doug out, because we're very family oriented. We just don't grab people that we don't know. I knew Doug, but the other guys didn't know Doug. And when they met Doug, we decided, yeah, this is going to work. But we decided not to call it Itchy Brother. We decided to go with a different name, which became the Headhunters. And that was named after, there was a book by Robert Palmer called Deep Blues. And there was a chapter in Deep Blues about Muddy Waters moving from the Delta to Chicago. And he put a little band together with Jimmy Rogers, Little Walter, James Cotton, and different people. And they'd play house parties or house rent parties. And they would also go to clubs, and they would ask to set in. And usually when they set in, they would blow the other band off, and they become known as the Headhunters, And we were really smart with that name, and we took it. We just ran with that name. And, of course, we didn't realize that Herbie Hancock had a group called the Headhunters, so that the Kentucky was added later. But
now,
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I have a few minutes left. I just want to get two more in. But go ahead.
Oh, yeah. The genesis of the Headhunters did start in '86, and then, yes, you're right. We had recorded a little. We brought Ricky in, and we recorded a little 45 record, which was recorded at A-Cuff Rose, Walk Softly, and Old Lonesome Me, but not the same versions that were on the original Pickin' on Nashville album. The original Pickin' on Nashville album was recorded in '88. We signed our deal in '89, and it was released in October of '89. And as you know, it just took off. It went crazy there for a bit.
Yeah, it was monstrous. I mean, it sold over 2 million copies and won a Grammy Award. And, you're a Grammy Award winner. It must have been a great feeling. I mean, you were victorious. I mean, you beat out the Judds. You beat out Alabama. How was that experience for you at the 33rd Grammy Award ceremony?
Oh, it was very surreal. When we were told that we were even up for a Grammy, we were blown away, because we never thought about awards. We didn't get into it for awards, and then to be nominated for a Grammy and to go to New York and actually win one was crazy. And I guess in the past we've been nominated 4 times, but we won one. And as soon as we won, I went down to Sam Ash and I bought me a DAT machine. I celebrated.
And now the latest album, That's a Fact, Jack. What can you tell us about that?
Well, that's a product of crawling out of the wreckage of 2020. Going back to 2019, we had a normal year. We toured. We did our normal. We don't stay on the road all the time. We do 70 dates a year, 75 or whatever. And it turned out to be a great year. We ended up going to UK for the 3rd time, and we toured with Jason and the Scorchers, Dan Baird and his band, and we had a great time. With those guys, we came back, finished up the touring in the States, and funny enough, I ended up getting pretty sick at the end of 2019 with some kind of flu. I'm kind of now wondering if I didn't have COVID, at that point. Some of us did.
And you're feeling okay now, but you're feeling okay?
Oh, yeah. I've actually had COVID a couple times, I guess. Oh, yeah, I'm fine, man.
Man,
2020, I was diagnosed with it again. I had it for sure. But back in 2019, nobody knew much about it, the end of 2019. We started, The funny thing is, Brian, we started hearing about it going into 2020. The news was, it was a lot of news overseas, about, over in China, this and that. So we ended up doing about 5 shows in early 2020. And our last official pre-pandemic show was in mid-February at the Birchmere in Alexandria, Virginia. We came home with the understanding we were going to be off 3 or 4 weeks, and then the touring was going to start in March, just like it is this year. And then, as we were home on our break, gigs started falling out, gigs started getting moved. Next thing you know, the pandemic is rearing its head over here, and things started locking down. So, we ended up maybe doing, after coming home off that one February gig, I think we ended up doing about 9 or 10 shows in 2020. And in November of 2020, I was diagnosed with COVID again, which wasn't that bad of a case. The first time around, if that's what it was much worse. But by the time I actually missed the very last show of 2020. So the guys grabbed Chris Robertson, the guitarist for Blackstone Cherry, to go out and sub for me. And I quarantined for 2 weeks. It was supposed to be 10 days, but they lost my number. And by the time they got a hold of me, it was 2 weeks. They said, "Oh, you're free to go." So I went to White Castle and had some burgers and celebrated. And but we were going to get together. We were going to get together and do some pre-production, some jamming, some writing to see what songs we had. But by the time I got through the quarantine, it was already Thanksgiving, and holiday season was coming, and the weather was changing, and we decided to reconvene in early January and at the studio and get together. And, of course, the weather prohibited that. So we finally got together in the studio in February of last year, and we started on That's a Fact, Jack. And people just brought in whatever songs they had, whatever ideas. And we had been sending a few things back and forth, email, through files. So we just got in and started sussing through whatever we had, and we started, somebody would bring a song out, we'd learn it on the spot, and we'd hit record, and we would go for the take. So it was, there again, it was just like crawling from the wreckage. So by April, the mixing was done, the tracking was done, then we got it mastered, and we secured our distribution deal, and it was released last October. Yeah.
Well, congratulations, Greg. I have like 10 seconds left. Listen, I really appreciate your time, and we're going to mention the website.
Thank you. Yeah, www. You got it. You take it.
You got it. Thank you so much. Honor to have you. Greg Martin of the Kentucky Headhunters. The website is KentuckyHeadhunters.net, gregmartin.com. Until next week, happy collecting to all.